My name's Adam Thompson, and I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I got started in art because my father was an architect. And when I was a kid, I had the good fortune of going to a very good school in Philadelphia that started kids doing sculptural work at a young age, like preschool or kindergarten. And my father taught me how to use power tools to do woodworking. We moved into a new house in the Philadelphia suburbs, and we actually built some paintings. They were actually like paintings made out of wood, where we used jigsaw and some other machines to cut out circular, triangular, and square pieces of wood, which we then put on a big sheet of plywood, like a painting. And that was my first real experience with art, because those really were incredible pieces of work. Unfortunately, when we moved to Florida, they were too fragile to take down with us. Otherwise, I'd still have them and keep those forever, because they're amazing. But yeah, so I studied in Philadelphia, and I went to the Haverford School in the Philadelphia suburbs, and then the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied architecture and creative writing. And I have to say the drafting classes that I took there were some of the most influential things to my art today. Two of the most influential teachers that I had as well, in addition to those drafting classes, were at the Haverford School. Chris Fox and Peter Kinney, two really incredible artists in their own right, who really were the ones who inspired me to pursue art in the way that I pursue it now. And when I was 19, I believe, I entered into a competition for a magazine in Miami called South of Fifth Magazine. And it was for 33 emerging creative artists you need to know. And I was one of the winners. And I was able to participate in a show that was associated with Art Basel. And I would say that that was one of the things that really helped launch my career. The art that I make, I would describe as modern abstract with a graffiti influence. I think some people will look at my art and say that it's street art, but I think that if you look harder, you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of influence from great artists of the 60s and 70s, who I really consider my primary influences. As well as graffiti art that came about in the 80s, stuff like Basquiat. But my biggest influences are people like Cy Twombly, who's really one of my absolute favorites, and Kandinsky and Mark Rothko, clearly. And growing up in Philadelphia, I had tremendous exposure to art and was seeing a lot of paintings by these artists, especially Cy Twombly, whose best works are in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and Marcel Duchamp, who's probably one of my favorite artists too. I have a painting over there that was just completely inspired by him because it's the 100th anniversary of most of his best works. Some of them, like these ones behind me, I had an idea of what I was going to do in my head. I've been working, I like to work on a series for maybe a year and develop it over time. So maybe the first few paintings I'll start out not knowing what I'm going to do, but then I start to get ideas as I go along, like, oh, I like this line, I like the way the head is thinner in these ones, I like the way my logo looks here, I like the way I place the colors, the different colors in different ways. And I'll store all these things in my head, and when I get to a new canvas at a late stage in the series, which is where I'm at and have been at for a little while, I'll have planned it all out. So I can picture it in my head. I'm like, oh, okay, this much of the canvas is this much of the canvas is the head, and I try and go in and get as close to what my idea in my head is as possible, but you know, no plan is perfect, and as I start painting, I reevaluate every few brush strokes or every few sprays. It's very important to step back. One of those teachers I mentioned, Christopher Fox, taught us the 6-foot rule, where you step 6 feet away from the canvas and take a look at it, because that's the distance that most people will be looking at it when they see it in a gallery or in a museum. So it's important to walk back. And I have my own version. I do the 6 foot and a cell phone test, because now people stand 6 feet away from the painting and then take a picture with their cell phone. So I also do that, and it's a nice little resource to look at to see how the colors look from a different set of eyes effectively. Well, I figured I'd maybe say a word about where I paint, because here I have this wonderful studio to paint in, but in Miami it's not so simple. I live in a nice apartment where I have a balcony, and I paint on the balcony there, but that's not always feasible because of the weather in Miami. So what I do is I go and I paint at nightclubs and charity events and corporate events and other people's houses, and it winds up becoming a case where very few of my paintings are actually painted at home or in my own personal studio. So I think it lends to a much greater diversity of work that I've been creating, where the energy that inspires me and the people that are around me are constantly changing. And I have to say it's one of the biggest strengths that I have with my career right now, is that I've had this opportunity to do that. That's been one of my favorite parts about making art, is getting to change up where I do. Yeah, this place, Espinasse Trentuno, has just been the most wonderful place for my career. Can't tell you how thankful I am to Antonio and his children for having me here. So it was really good timing when I did this residency. So I was here throughout June into July, and it was a very good time for me to be doing something like that, because I just had started this new series that's called The Blockheads, and it's inspired by the Moai of Easter Island, these giant stone head sculptures that you may have seen before. And the story is that these Aboriginal people living on this remote island, like in the middle of the Pacific, thousands of miles away from South America, they were so determined to build these heads that they all died out. They cut down every single tree on the island and used every single resource that they had, and they wound up actually killing themselves off with it. And I personally live in Miami Beach, and I think there's a tremendous parallel between these two things happening, where, you know, we're just overrunning the natural beauty of the place and building buildings that are too large for the place. And I love architecture, and I love buildings, I love skyscrapers. I love seeing them get built, I love watching them get built. But you can overdo it. You know, those Moai are the same. They're beautiful, they're incredible sculptures, and it would have been great if there were a bunch of them, but they built too many of them and they died out. And that's the fear with humanity, you know, that we're just gonna pave over every, you know that song, it's like paved over paradise and put up a parking lot. Mark Rothko here is one of my favorite artists. This painting was very heavily inspired by him. I mean, the painting itself, the general composition and the colors and the layout is very similar to some of his paintings. And for me, it's something that I've always wanted to do. I feel like you can't just paint the splotches of color and call it a Mark Rothko, because there's a much greater emotional depth that takes some time to get to as an artist. And over the years, I've been heavily resistant to making anything that looked like a Rothko for that reason, as I didn't feel like I was ready for it yet, even though it's something so simple. And when I did the residence here at Espinasse Trentuno, I finally felt like I was ready, and I did it. For me, it was a very cathartic piece. It was really one of the most important things that I've done in my career to make me feel like I've advanced as an artist. So for a while, I've been working on fashion. One of my other passions is clothing and fashion. So I've done several projects with this. I've done dresses, I've done men's dress shirts, t-shirts, pants, sneakers, and jackets. And lately I've been doing a lot of jackets. And I really love these things. This is one of my own designs right here. And I'm putting some of my new shapes and figures onto it. And it's an exciting project that I can't wait to see what happens with. Might be working with a couple clothing companies in the next year, including both in Miami and Milan. So let's see what happens. If you are shy about showing your art, if you are nervous, you're never going to make it as an artist. You have no hope. This is a day and age where you have to be willing to put your best foot forward all the time. You know, there's a million different avenues of social media. I actually, you know, a very good example of this is with tagging. You know, where people write their logos or their name in the bubble letters, you know, on the walls, like the stuff that you see on the sides of trains. Tagging, I hate tagging. I'm really like, maybe I shouldn't use the word hate, but I strongly dislike the concept of tagging in the modern day and age. Because I get that for some people it's an aesthetic thing that they like, but I've learned from people in New York, like who are much older than me, that tagging exists because before there was the internet, you know, a lot of people would live their lives and be unknowns. You know, they knew that they were never going to do very much with their lives. They didn't have the resources, they didn't have, you know, whatever it was. So by tagging a prominent place, like a subway car in New York City or something, you're guaranteeing that like 6 million people see your name every year. You know, which is something that you may not have had the opportunity to do before. But now with the internet, you know, we have Twitter. You know, and if one of your tweets gets picked up by somebody, you know, 100 million people could see it in a day or something. You know, like, the world has changed. It's a different place. You know, the modern tagging is like getting something viral on the internet. You know, you want to be seen, put it out there. There's a tremendous amount of resources for everybody. And there's no closed market for art anymore. You know, they say that like the art market is like a cartel, but it's not anymore because you can't hold too tight of a grasp of something that can be exposed on the internet publicly. You know, maybe the big collectors will stick to what they're told to buy, but there's like 7 billion people in the world, and all of them like art. Pretty much everyone in the world likes art. So you as an artist have an opportunity to expose yourself to that many people. And like a huge percentage of those people have access to the internet now. And every day that percentage grows, and pretty soon it'll be 100%. So my advice to emerging artists is to put yourself out there. And I mean that literally. Like, I mean, put your pieces on the internet, put them on Reddit, put them on Facebook, ask your friends to share it, you know, save up $20 and buy an Instagram ad. You know, it doesn't take very much to buy an ad these days. You know, just go out to art shows, meet some art dealers, art gallerists, and work hard, because that's what 90% of it is. Certainly see plenty of artists who just sit around doing drugs all day and never actually really go out and do any work. You know, that's not going to get you anywhere. You know, that may be cool, but not really.